Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on the Flash film, movie, whichever way I want to put it. And this is my spoiler review for the film. Now, I'm going to try and upload this like on the day that it's out worldwide, so hopefully I time it correctly. Fingers crossed, time zones are weird. But the movie's now out in Australia at the very least. And I did get to see it at a preview screening last night, so I'm recording this day after. So hopefully I time it correctly and it's not going up before it's out worldwide. As I said, time zone and different releases are weird. But yeah, spoiler review. If you've not watched the movie, go away. I do have a non-spoiler review. I'll link it in the description down below if you want to go check that out, if you want to get my non-spoiler thoughts. But in this video, we're going to be touching on all the spoilery areas which you wouldn't want to talk about in a non-spoiler review. So all the different, story beats that like are surprises, the cameos, the ending, everything like that. We're going to be talking about all that. So yeah, go away if you don't want to be spoiled on all that stuff. But if you have watched the film, let me know in the comment section down below your various thoughts on this movie, spoiler-wise and everything like that. What caught you by surprise? What you would change? What you weren't a fan of? Your overall rating in the film out of 5 or 10, whichever way you want to put it. Let me know in the comments. Because I think this movie is going to have maybe differing thoughts, but I'd be surprised if people didn't like it. Like, I am actually going to be surprised if people don't like it. But then again, I'm not tapped into everyone's brain, so I'm not going to know, am I? And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, want to show your support, drop a like, takes 2 seconds. So the first thing I want to talk about is the opening scene. Like the opening scene for this film, like this big action set piece starting in Central City with, Barry trying to get some food and dealing with the slowest surfer in the world was quite funny, and just leading into Gotham. I thought it was a great way to open it and really tapped into the Flash's powers straight out of the gate. And I think one thing it built that I wouldn't have mind seeing explored more was the Flash's role in Central City, because we're in Central City for really none of this movie. It's actually sort of surprising how little Central City plays a part in this film. It's a Flash movie. You'd expect either Central or Keystone City to be the main city we're in. We're in Gotham most of the time, whether it's in this opening act, and then when we go and deal like in the Flashpoint world as well, we're not really in Central City that much. We're not in it like none at all. There's still like a decent amount of scenes in there, but percentage-wise, we're hardly there. And I wish we were there in Central City more, especially pre-Flashpoint, to see what the Flash's reputation is within Central City, if you want to put it. We see some like teenagers on the street, which was in, I think, some of the promos and trailers, with them going like, "Oh my God, it's the Flash," and everything like that. But that's about it. So I wish there was a bit more to that. But and also because he's been the Flash for or at least he's had his powers for about 9 years, I think it might have been in this timeline. So I think 9 years he's had the powers. So, he should be somewhat recognized. So it would have been nice to see more of that. But unfortunately, that's not there. They, because of how the movie flows along, if you want to put it. But yeah, this opening scene, we're dealing with like those terrorists. They say it's like a young guy. I'm not too sure if that's meant to be someone from the comics. I'm not exactly sure. They don't name him. So I don't know if I don't want to name any names just in case I'm wrong. But yeah, I'm not too sure if it's meant to be someone from the comics or not, because they don't name this young terrorist that's driving around and that Batman and the Flash have to team up and stop. But yeah, the terrorist with it. But that hospital scene with the baby shower scene, as it's being referred to, I thought was really fun. Now, this probably jumps into the whole thing because I'll touch upon it now. The CGI. There's been a lot of questions about the CGI, the VFX, everything like that. They are weird. So as some of you would know, I did see the movie like about 5-6 weeks ago, something like that, at a really it was like 2 weeks after CinemaCon, and it was the same version that was shown there, and the VFX looked weird. I was like, oh, that doesn't look that amazing, but maybe it'd be better in the actual finished thing. They look the exact same, so that's what they wanted the VFX to look like. It did look a bit weird, whether it was the babies coming down or that dog. Like the humans and stuff looked fine. It was just little things like that, like the baby CGI looked really weird, and that dog looked a bit odd. I'm still not sure if that was intentional, like that's what they wanted it to look like, or if that's just what the finished product was. So some people have major issues with it. I don't really care too much, unless it's like completely jarring, and it's not. It's just like, yeah, that's a bit off. Like that's just a bit off. It just doesn't look natural. Actually, that's probably not the best way to put it. It's not, it doesn't look natural, because it's not a real baby that's falling down. But it's so obviously VFX. Does that make sense? Or obviously CGI. And sometimes you'd want them to sort of bridge like that and make it look somewhat real, and just clearly looks like a video game character. And I'm not too sure if that was the intention or not. Because as I said, the adults a lot of the time look fine in the CGI form and everything like that. But yeah, just the babies and the dogs looked weird. So I don't know, just something I'd point out now. And well, there is some other stuff with CGI, but it's relating to an a specific portion or area of the film. So we'll talk about that fairly soon in this review. But yeah, seeing Alfred, we get Jeremy Irons in there as Alfred. I thought it was cool. Once again, they spoiled him in a goddamn trailer. I could not believe that because I don't think anyone knew he was in this movie. I don't think anyone knew he was in this movie. When he showed up and I was watching it for the first time, like 5 weeks ago, I was like, oh God, he's in this? I had no idea. Like I knew Ben Affleck was there. So maybe I should have just assumed that Alfred was going to be in there. But yeah, I just didn't think Jeremy Irons would do it. I just didn't think he would do it. And they spoiled him in a trailer. I don't understand why. And I think they also spoiled another person who shows up in the first act, once again in a promo, and a Funko Pop, which was Wonder Woman. So I took my mum to see it last night, and she was like, oh, Wonder Woman's in this? Because like it's not on the posters or anything like that. She knew Ben Affleck's Batman and Michael Keaton's Batman and all that was in there. Had no idea about goddamn Wonder Woman. So I don't know why they did that. There's weird things that they put out there in spoilers, in like promo material or merchandise that they didn't need to. So I don't know why they did that, because I think it actually limited some surprises in the actual film. And it didn't really bother me too much because I didn't know about it a lot the first time I saw it. I've more discovered it in the weeks following up to the release of the film. And I think they even spoiled the Alfred thing like only last week, like a week before the film came out. So I'm not too sure why they did that. But yeah, seeing him there was cool. Ben Affleck as Batman is awesome. And it's daytime Batman. Daytime Batman. Like you don't see too much of daytime Batman. I mean, there was some of it in like the Dark Knight trilogy, but like not like in like a overly functioning city like that you had in this film. So seeing that was really, really cool. And his suit is like a blue-gray. It's not like fully blue like the K, but it's like a blue. It's some sort of bluey color with the gray suit. And his suit looks really cool in that. And then, of course, as I said before, Wonder Woman is really brief, but her scene is funny when she shows up. Yeah, for the short time she's on screen, she's funny. And I think she must have done this stuff when she was, I think she did Shazam at the same time. I think she might have done just a trifecta of cameos in these movies. Shazam 2, Flash, and I think she's meant to be an Aquaman, or at least originally meant to be an Aquaman. Who knows if they erase her cameo, and I'm not too sure. But especially based off the end of this movie. But yeah, so she was cool to see and a bit funny as well. And apparently Barry's a virgin, so that's news to us, I guess. Now, one big thing heading into this was Snyder Cut references. Everyone's like, oh, is the Snyder Cut canon to this? Is it not, or anything like that? And really, there are only 2 references to the events of the Snyder Cut that aren't in the theatrical version of Justice League, and they are minimal. One is literally Ben Affleck mumbling. He mumbles like the time travel sequence, and he mentions like the Russians or wherever there was, that city that they were in at the end, like the final act of Justice League, and how Barry time travels, but it's only back 1 second, while this time Barry wants to travel back, 18 years or whatever it is. And then when Barry is talking to Iris, as you were saying, they mentioned that Iris recognizes Barry, that they've run into each other recently or something along those lines. 2 minimal references, and all the other references throughout the film to Justice League are events that also take place in the theatrical edition of the film. So I don't know if they only included those 2 minimal ones to sort of like appease fans that want it to be canon to the Snyder Cut, though it sort of just mostly grounds itself being attached to events that happen in both of those films. So yeah, people are wondering. So yeah, if you missed them, those were the 2 little references. If there was any other ones, let me know. But I think those are only 2 like minimal ones they had. Now, one thing, speaking of Justice League, is no Cyborg. So the scenes in this movie that you would have seen, or if you've seen the movie, hopefully if you're watching this video, you've seen the movie, but if you haven't, there's scenes in this movie that show the Justice League, but no Cyborg. They mentioned Cyborg and Victor Stone like a handful of times roughly, but they don't show him, which really surprised me because like Ray Fisher was offered to show up, and obviously there's all that drama that happened like 2 or 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago. I don't know, whatever it was. It's probably still going, but it started 2 or 3 years ago. So yeah, I don't know if that was Warner Brothers saying no, or maybe it was because they didn't, like, I guess if they used the likeness, they might have to pay. I'm not too sure what the issue was there. They also don't show Darkseid. They also show Parademons, but they don't show Darkseid throughout the film when they're showing all this Justice League related stuff. So interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure people have an issue with that one. I'm guessing at the very least they will. Now, the Speed Force time travel sequences are really cool in this film. Now, and we have to use this term Chrono Bowl, which we were all confused about when we started seeing it in like merchandise. Is that like it's like Chrono Bowl and like Multiverse Chrono Bowl, and we're like Chrono Bowl, and then when you see the movie and you're watching the thing, you're like, oh, Chrono Bowl, I get it. So it's not like a chronological timeline thing. It's literally a bowl of the chronological timeline, and the whole Colosseum aspect and everything I thought was really, really cool. Now, of course, Barry time travels to stop his mother dying and his father going to prison by preventing his father leaving the house via a can of tomatoes that his mother forgot to get at the shop earlier in the day. And this is basically after the last attempt at trying to prove his father's innocence. But here's where the big thing happens that, the big thing that doesn't happens, if that makes sense. And that is no Reverse Flash. Now, as a Flash fan, I am disappointed with this. I am disappointed, and there's no hint that it is someone like Reverse Flash that does this. Outside of the fact the person who does it leaves very quickly, but there's no sound effect or anything like that. So Nora dies in the same fashion that she dies in the comics, where she's stabbed. In the comics, she is stabbed. I don't know if they're actually saying in the comics specifically she's stabbed. I know she, when they find her, there's like a pool of blood on the floor. But I think they said she was stabbed. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, she was stabbed. Let's just say she was stabbed, because she's also stabbed in the film, of course, as well, with the knife that apparently she was, cooking with, or making food with, or preparing food with. But you don't hear any noise. You just hear commotion downstairs, Nora screaming, and she screams just as Henry's coming home from the shops as well. When he runs inside, she's just there on the floor, and there seems to be no clear evidence of someone getting away quickly, or anything like that, like an open door. It's just the front door's open because that's where Henry came through. So it makes you think it was a speedster, and maybe that's the whole point. They've left it up to the imagination of the viewer as to who did it. But there's going to be a lot of people that watch this film that don't know the Flash lore and who killed Nora specifically. So I don't know if that's something that they would want to explore in a sequel, which is, fingers crossed that would be the case, that they would actually want to explore that, and then you would have this figure come in and it would bring up this trauma again from Barry. Though I would prefer if that trauma was dealt with before this film, if that makes sense, because I don't think it's based off the ending of this film. I don't think it'd be right to revisit it again. So I feel like they missed a chance to use Reverse Flash, or at least hint that that was the person that did it. So yeah, there's no sign of that, which is a bit disappointing. Just as a Flash fan, it was a bit disappointing. I'm not saying we should have seen Reverse Flash, definitely not anything like that, but just some sort of evidence there. But some people might have an issue with it. Some people might not care at all. It's probably up to the individual viewer. But as I said, just as a Flash fan, I was sort of disappointed. There was zero suggestion that it was Reverse Flash, outside of the fact that I guess the person got away pretty quickly, as if they were a speedster. But this is where we do enter Flashpoint in 2013, with Barry going back and sort of, making sure his mother doesn't die. So his father's home, and apparently, Nora wouldn't get killed if Henry's still there, which makes you think it wasn't Reverse Flash, because he'd probably do it anyway, but regardless. And obviously, it's not Barry's intention to come out in 2013, but he's pushed out by, obviously, someone, which we'll touch upon later in the video. But it was interesting going back here, and that this is what they decided to do, where it's the Flashpoint timeline, but it's different than what we have in the Flashpoint storyline from the comics, and even the animated movie as well, where Barry's just in the present day. Let's say he left in 2022. Well, he comes back to 2022, and that's where it's different. He's kicked out halfway between coming back. So he's, not where he's meant to be, which I thought was somewhat interesting. And it has that almost Back to the Future element to an extent. And this obviously allows for there to be two Barrys. So he's not going back to the present day and then sort of fusing or becoming one with that present day version. He's coming out halfway between, where there's still two of him. And the two Barrys are going to be, I'm very intrigued to see what people think about them. So let me know specifically what you think of these two Barrys in the comments, because I think people are going to, not everyone, because I don't really mind him too much, because I understand what they were doing, but I think a bunch of people are going to hate the younger Barry, or Kid Flash. Some people call him Kid Flash. But I think a bunch of people are going to hate, because he's really, really energetic and a bit annoying and just a bit silly, but he's also 18 years old. And, the one thing I did like that they did is that they did make both of the Barrys different, because you got to remember, this younger Barry is one that, sure, he's younger, but he's also a Barry that grew up with his mum and dad. It's not our Barry from the main timeline whose mother was killed and his father went to prison when he was much younger. So I do like that they made them different. The younger Barry, is just like sort of carefree, like there's, you know, just sort of like breezing along, like, you know, going along with life pretty easily. And there's like, I don't know what the word would be, but there's no like stakes, if that makes sense. He's just sort of like carefree, as I said. But then you have our Barry, who's gone through all this trauma when he was younger and just been thinking about it nonstop and sort of committed his life to trying to fix the wrongs of the past. And he's just sort of getting frustrated with this person who's just ungrateful. Like ungrateful is the term that's used by the older Barry to the younger Barry throughout the film. So I thought making them drastically different was a very, very smart choice. And I think Ezra Miller did a really, really good job portraying both versions of the character. And it must be said, I think like Zack Snyder has said that he cast Ezra Miller based off Ezra's performance in Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I'd say that the younger Barry is very much like that character from that movie. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was the intention. He's not like exactly like that Perks of Being a Wallflower character. Can't remember what the character's name is in the movie. But obviously it's played by Ezra Miller. But it's sort of similar to that. That's probably a good comparison to use. Now, whether it was needed for there to be two Barrys, I think is actually very questionable. It's a valid question. I honestly don't think for a lot of this movie, it's necessary. I think the only times it's necessary is to push that emotional story with Barry's mother and what's happening in this storyline, that you have this person who's grown up all these years and not really treated it with respect and been grateful for it. Those are the times where it really works. The other times it feels like it could have been anyone. It could have been any other speedster. It could have been any other superhero. It didn't have to be another Barry that gets the powers. And obviously I forgot to mention, like, this younger Barry gets the powers after they try to replicate the accident. So this younger Barry gets powers because he's not on the same sort of path of life as our older Barry, but ends up the lightning hitting our older Barry and it transferring over to the younger Barry. So the older one loses his powers, the younger one gets them, and then it's like this sort of tutelage role and stuff like that. I don't think that was necessary. I didn't think it was actually 100% necessary in this film, and I don't necessarily like think it had to be there, you know? But I did really like the emotional core with those two there, with the whole mother aspect and everything like that. That worked. The other stuff was just like, okay, I'm fine with it. Now, the use of Man of Steel in this film, I'm very intrigued to see what people have to say about this, because I was sort of shocked how little it's in the film. It's in every ad. It's in every trailer. You see Zod. I feel like Zod is in every single promo. I reckon Michael Shannon must have worked for 4 days. He must have done nothing. Because half of it looks like it's reused from Man of Steel. And then there's a bunch where, like, there's only like, he's on screen for like 10 minutes properly as Zod. He must have done nothing. I was shocked how little he's in this film. And Fiora, you see like twice. She's hardly in the film either. They were in the trailers. They made a big deal about them coming back. Like, I feel like Ben Affleck did more filming than Michael Shannon. And I don't know, like, I was sort of really, really shocked how little the Man of Steel stuff overly plays into the film in regards to what you see on screen. It's a big part of the movie as a whole, because it's that big flashpoint change and the catalyst why Barry sort of like has to get into action quickly and do everything that he's doing. He could just, he could go, easy breezy through this timeline, take his time to figure out stuff. But the whole Zod invasion is sort of speeding up the process. Like, hey, we have to act quickly right now. But in regards to like Zod being on screen, hardly there. And I think people are going to be disappointed by that. For me, I don't really care, because I made it vocal. I don't really like Man of Steel that much. I think it's an okay movie. As a Superman movie, it's not very good. So I'm not the biggest fan of it, but I know people love it. And I'm not trying to be edgy there. That's just my opinion. I've always stated that on my channel. That's nothing new. But I know people love the movie. So I feel like people are going to go in expecting, oh, what's this like sort of like alternate take on Man of Steel? And it's not really in the movie that much. So I was surprised by that. Some might disagree. I think I sort of referenced it in my non-spoiler review, but without spoiling it. And someone said I disagree, which is fine. But I've talked to someone else who's seen the movie and they 100% agree with me. It's like, oh yeah, it was hardly in there. I was very surprised by that. So if you disagree, let me know. If you agree, also let me know. And if you had any other issues with it. But it was cool to see that our Barry was actually a part of that thing. Like, he got his powers, like, was it the day or two, I think, before the invasion in the main timeline. So he had like this proto suit where there's a Funko Pop of it, which a lot of people thought was going to be our alternate, like the younger Barry that wore that because he couldn't wear the Flash suit. But it's actually the main Barry from 10 years prior. So I thought that was really cool. And it sort of like quickly put him into action of being a hero, which once again sort of leans into the fact I wish we saw more of Central City in this film with the Flash in it. But maybe we'll get that in a sequel. Now, Michael Keaton's Batman it's every single time it was on screen, you're like, that dude is awesome. He is really cool. And it was really interesting to see he's retired as Batman because there's no real need for him to be Batman anymore because Gotham is now one of the safest cities in the world, which I was like, okay, well, that's a bit of a change of pace, isn't it? But there's no need, and he's sort of just retired Batman now. I thought that was pretty interesting, and it was also cool to see the Batcave that he was in the 89, 92 movie updated a bit to some sort of modern technology because obviously he would have kept being Batman for a bit after that. So it was cool to see some of that more updated stuff there while also still feeling a bit retro and a bit used at the same time. Now, there's not a ridiculous amount of stuff into diving into what has happened since outside of the fact he retired and Gotham being safe. There's little Easter eggs and stuff the Joker bag or whatever it was. Which was cool. Obviously Alfred's passed away at this point because it's been years and stuff like that. One thing I was actually so annoyed at, and I would not take points off this movie on my score for it, but I was like, oh, come on, you can't tease us and not do anything with it. Was the Batmobile? We don't drive around in the Batmobile? Come on, you don't bring back that Batmobile and we don't drive around in it. Hopefully it was in the script and they just couldn't figure out a way to make it work because they used the Batwing multiple times, which was cool. But I was like, come on, it's the Batmobile, the classic Keaton Batmobile. Let's go. But yeah, we don't drive around in it. I think the younger Barry, he sleeps in it one night, overnight or something like that. He sleeps in it. But that's about it. That's the closest we get to driving around in it is that younger Barry sort of sleeping in it. But I was like, oh, come on, let's go. Let's drive this baby around. But yeah, we didn't get to do it, which I was very disappointed by. Now, Supergirl was really interesting in this film because obviously they used the whole Flashpoint thing where she was locked up like Superman was because obviously in the Flashpoint comics, Superman or Kal-El crashes into Metropolis and is seen as this big threat and locked away and stuff like that. But they also mix it with the Red Sun thing with the whole Soviet aspect where she crashed into the Soviet area and then she was locked up there. So it's a bit of a mixture of Flashpoint and Red Sun, which I thought was pretty interesting. And once again, there's nothing overly divulged with her outside of the fact that she was sent alongside Kal-El to protect him, but the pod was intercepted, Kal-El was killed, and they changed it around where the Codex that was in Man of Steel, that we, in Man of Steel we saw Jor-El put it within Kal-El, it's actually within Kara, Zor-El this time around. So she's the one with the Codex within her. So Zod's actually hunting her, and it's her pod that he tracked. So that's the difference from Man of Steel leading into this one. That's how Supergirl sort of plays into it. And the thing with this is that I think it's weird because I think the way that they changed the movie, where in the promo material of recent, there's been a promo that they're showing over the past week or so, they show a clip of Supergirl in the end scene, the final scene in the movie before the credits. She's in that area. It's not in the movie. So they've deleted that scene. And I think that actually helps that character potentially going into other movies. It is a wait and see. We don't know exactly how it's going to go. They're probably waiting to see how the public reacts to, I guess, Sasha Calle's take on Supergirl. But she's the character they sort of leave open and not connected to where this Barry goes come the end of the movie. So I'm intrigued to see what they do with her because they didn't include that scene that was meant to be at the end of the movie that we actually had set photos from. That's where they first saw the Supergirl suit in those set photos was from that scene that originally had Michael Keaton in it and now doesn't. So yeah, but there's nothing really overly spoiler in regards to the Supergirl character outside of the fact that she's the one with the Codex within her rather than Kal-El this time around. So yeah. But this all leads into the third act or the war ground fight area. I don't know what you would call it with the Kryptonians, that whole thing. And this scene is where I think people might not like because it is very rushed in my opinion. It felt like that was oh, we want it, just let's get along because they've done a lot of good stuff in the first two acts. And then the third act is we have to just do this big action set piece. And a lot of it looked cool, but it also looked like a bit of a dead area at the same time. Just because, just how open it was. And really there's only one main threat, which is Zod, and that's who they're trying to stop. But there's all these other people there at the same time. But I still think it's really cool. There's the music scene and everything like that. When the older Barry goes, come on, Barbie, and then the younger Barry goes, let's go party, I was like, why not play the song? It's in the track list. The track list came out and it's there. So I wonder if it was originally meant to be used in the film in that scene. I'm not too sure. Yeah, because it seems like they were just queuing up to go, come on, Barbie, let's go party. And then you get the, oh no, whatever it is would start playing. But I was really confused by that, but I thought it was funny. But at the same time, I was like, where is this song? It sounds like they just set it up to start playing, but it didn't happen. But I think young Barry and our older Barry teaming up and everything was really cool. Obviously, in the trailers, you've seen it with you have like the blue lightning from the young Barry and the yellow lightning from the older one. And like the whole explanation with the blue and the yellow lightning is that the blue is like an uncontrolled or less contained version of it, while the suit that Barry has sort of like filters it properly and like controls it better. Where it's just a more controlled use of the speed force. So that's why it's yellow and blue is more erratic. I think they just did that because of what was in the Justice League movies. Obviously most people, I know some people like the blue lightning. I'm not going to debate whether you should or shouldn't like the blue lightning. I don't really like it. I just rather the Flash has yellow lightning in and out of the suit. But they use that. I think Andy Muschietti has sort of said in interviews, he sort of had to build off what was already there. He couldn't just really completely reinvent the character and the look. So I don't know if he necessarily wanted to use the blue lightning, but it sort of allows to distinguish the two speeds as when you see them running around, you go, okay, well, I know the blue lightning is the young Barry and the yellow lightning is the older Barry. So it allows in that scene to distinguish them. When they connect, it looks cool because it's different colors. But yeah, the blue lightning, I'm just never really been that big of a fan with in regards to like that being the Flash's natural color, really, because that's what it is. It's the suit that makes it yellow. So if there is a sequel, hopefully we have our Barry just out of the suit being able to control himself better, so he just normally has yellow, because I'm sick of blue lightning. I want it gone. If we don't get a sequel to this movie, whatever James Gunn does, don't touch blue lightning unless it's a character that's meant to have blue lightning. Just yellow lightning for Barry Allen, please. Please. Red for Reverse Flash, yellow for Barry. Thank you very much. But obviously, Supergirl and Batman die. Their thing is like a fixed point, if you want to put it. They're meant to die at this point. There's nothing you can change. It's very much like the whole Nora Allen death. It's just meant to happen in this timeline. That's the case with... So Nora doesn't die in this Flashpoint timeline, but Supergirl and Batman are meant to die. And this leads into pretty much the crazy part where the young Barry just keeps time traveling back and forth, or back around, if you want to put it, to try and fix things and stop this fixed point from continuously happening. And during this point, he's getting Kryptonian like weaponry and shards of Kryptonian tech like pretty much impaled into him at different points, which is slowly turning him into the villain for the film, which is Dark Flash. And I must say, the look of Dark Flash in the film is much cooler than any of the stuff we've seen. The Funko Pop looks like ass. The action figure looks like ass. In the movie, it's much cooler. It has purple lightning, which I thought was really like different and cool. I wasn't expecting purple lightning to be on this type of character, but I thought it looked really, really cool, especially in the Speed Force, because it's, you know, different than what we've seen with the other speedsters in that arena and everything like that. But it is just pretty much an older version that's been constantly going through and trying to stop that event for years and years and years and years and years, and is still trying to do it, just continuously trying to do it. And he's just gotten more corrupt and more damaged over time. And, you know, I think people are going to be disappointed, but I don't think it's a great villain. I think it's a cool looking villain. It's a villain that makes sense, but at the same time, it's not even a villain. It's just a threat at the end that tries to kill our Barry because he's trying to stop them, you know, this Dark Flash from trying to stop this event from happening. And obviously Dark Flash was the one that originally pushed Barry out in 2013, so he could go and then create this younger Barry and give him speed, and then that could lead to Dark Flash happening again. So, you know, and like this is the whole paradox thing. They bring in like the whole Flashpoint paradox into this situation as well, which I was like, okay, once again, they pretty much just took Reverse Flash out. And obviously the story would be different if you involved Reverse Flash anyway, but then use this Dark Flash character as a ends to a mean, if you want to put it. But also like a bit of a creation standpoint as well. So yeah, I didn't mind Dark Flash. It looked cool, but at the same time, it wasn't amazing. You know, like the villain is, I think that if you're going to class him as a villain, I think probably the weakest point. Is Zod the villain? I don't know. But if you're saying Dark Flash is the villain, that's a pretty weak villain. But this story doesn't necessarily need a villain the way that they were telling it. Dark Flash could have been removed. I don't think it really changes too much. I don't think it really changes too much, to be completely honest. But once again, it's probably up to the individual viewer to decide whether that's right or not. But with the Dark Flash sequence, this is where we do get like the big Chrono Bowl scene. And in regards to the Chrono Bowl, people are going to point out the CGI here. I was sort of referencing it before when we're talking about the Justice League. But when Barry's traveling through time, you pretty much just like, you get like levels that drop down, like levels of this big arena of Chrono Bowl that's just sort of dropping down when Barry's going through time. So you'll see 2013, then when he goes past that, you'll see 2010 or whatever it is. And they all look very CGI. And I was like, okay, I have no idea if this is meant to be intentional because they could just use footage from the movies. You see Henry Cavill from Justice League when he's like shirtless after he's come back to life and he's like fighting the Flash in the Justice League, like outside of Star Labs. And he looks cartoony. And you're like, why? Like and then you see like Aquaman and Wonder Woman and Batman, like just use footage from the movie. But I saw an interview with Andy Muschietti like only like 2 or 3 hours before making this video. And he said that was the intention. He wanted them to look like they're wax figures in a museum. And I was like, if that was the intention, he succeeded. He did succeed if that was the intention. And so I can't really criticize too much if that was the intention to make them look waxy. But here's the next thing. It's the cameo. So one of the big things was the cameos in this film. Now, there is one earlier in the film with Tamura Morrison playing Thomas Curry, where it's sort of like showing a Flashpoint difference where he never met Queen Atlanta, they never had Arthur, so there's no Aquaman. So that's like a funny Flashpoint scene, and that was a very surprising cameo. I wasn't expecting to see him show up, but yeah, so that was like an example there. But then all the other cameos, like the ones that I guess people weren't expecting that weren't in like Funko Pops or whatever it was, or trailers, it's like you get like it's like the multiverse, all these different worlds coming in, and like this, like obviously one of the issues I had here, and I sort of hinted at it in my non-spoiler, was like the moral side of it. And it's mainly because I just don't feel comfortable seeing dead people. And I understand like the estate gave them permission to use it, but at the same time, you could have used other cameos from people that are alive. Like you could have gotten people to come in and do them. Now, the thing is that maybe people didn't want to come and do them, which is fine. I actually completely understand if they didn't want to do them. But you could do like Helen Slater. They have like the Christopher Reeve CGI character looking upon all the stuff that's happening. But then Helen Slater's Supergirl comes down. I'm like, Helen Slater's still alive. Why don't you just show her as like an older Supergirl or an older Superwoman? Like you could do that. Or they show like the only one that I think works in its own thing, and it's also a very niche cameo, is the Nicolas Cage one, because it's almost like a what if, type thing. But even then, I don't know how many people are going to get that. People just go like, is that like in my screening last night when they showed it, people were like, that meant to be Nicolas Cage? Because a lot of people don't know he was meant to be Superman. Like in my initial one when I saw it like 6 weeks ago, when it was like people that knew stuff, everyone was like, oh my God. But because it was people that like, you know. But in like a basic screening with general public, I think people would just go, is that goddamn Nicolas Cage? What the hell is that? Like no one would understand the reference there. So I think they could have done better cameos. And Andy Muschietti did say that he was given free reign. He could choose any cameos as long as they were DC characters. He could choose whoever he wanted. He said that. So I think with that, they missed the mark. Now, some people might not have any issue at all with the Christopher Reeve cameo or the George Reeves cameo, the Adam West cameo. I think they're the only ones that were dead. So those ones, people might not have an issue with them at all. Well, you know what? That's fine if that's the case. For me, I was like, and mine's not like a complete issue where like I hated saying that. It's still cool. Like that's like they included that in there. But at the same time, like you could have chosen people that are actually alive. People are really going to point out Grant Gustin. Now, on the Grant Gustin side of things, I actually don't think, unless you're going to do the Arrowverse as a whole, as one world, and you would have had Grant there with maybe Melissa Benoist Supergirl, Stephen Amell Green Arrow, and maybe someone else that alongside them. I don't know, someone, maybe Stargirl, I don't know, something like that. Or maybe like Tyler Hoechlin Superman, whatever it might have been. If you weren't going to do all of them, I think where Grant Gustin should have had a cameo is stuff where they could have reused a scene, and that would have been in the Chrono Bowl when the timeline is coming down, and it would have been the crisis scene with the two Flashes shaking hands. To me, that's what shocked me, because they show this timeline going down, and I'm like, put it there. Put it there. You don't have to get Grant Gustin to come film a cameo. You reuse the scene from Crisis, which was filmed like a movie almost. Put it there. Them shaking hands. How cool would that be? Two Flashes shaking hands in the timeline, and it recognizes that that moment happened. That was where I would have put that. I don't know if a cameo with them, like a new scene being filmed or stuff, was necessary. It's Ezra Miller's movie. It's not 100% necessary. for Grant to be there in that way. But the timeline would have been the best place to put it, where, you know, when Ezra's Barry is going back through time. Show it there. That would have been the best time to do it. But the cameo thing, I think once it, like, more people see it, it's probably going to get deconstructed a lot. There might be some more criticism to it. And I think it's probably going to start a debate on the use of dead characters or dead actors in roles like this again. Especially maybe if they didn't personally sign off on it themselves. Like Bruce Willis has, but Christopher Reeve, I don't know if he did, and it's up to Christopher Reeve's estate to decide on that, because they would have given clearance, but did Christopher Reeve want that? So that's a debate. Same with Adam West, same with George Reeves, and like George Reeves died much younger than he was meant to. So there's a moral issue there, and I'm very intrigued to see what the conversation is after this point. But anyway, let's move on to something that's not necessarily happy, but it's still a good scene. It was the goodbye scene between Barry and Nora in the grocery shop and everything like that. I thought Ezra did a really good job here. I think Maribel Verdú, who I mistakenly said was Mexican in my non-spoiler review, she's actually Spanish. I should have said Hispanic. That's what I should have said, just because it covers a couple of different countries. But yeah, I think I said that because she was in a Mexican movie. That's why I think one of the movies she's most well known for is a Mexican film. So that's why I said it. But anyway, Spanish actress Maribel Verdú. She was really good as Nora Allen. Limited, but works in pretty much all the scenes. Like you side with her. You're like sad when she dies. Like, oh, she's such a nice woman. You know, she wasn't like mean or anything. You could tell she loved Barry. You could tell the family with Barry, Nora, and Henry was really strong and stuff like that. So you're like, yeah, that family did not deserve to be separated, let alone just separated at all, or in the circumstances that it happened. So you buy the chemistry between Maribel and Ezra as Nora and Barry. And the goodbye scene was, quite emotional. Ezra nails it as an actor as well. Obviously, comparisons are going to be brought up between the Flash TV show and that scene. The Flash TV show version is better, but it obviously has a lot of build up with all the emotion and stuff with Barry, throughout that season. So yeah, and that's probably where the movie could have done with the movie beforehand, just so you understand more of Barry going through that and everything like that. But the TV show does it better. Like I don't think there's any question around it, but it's still a really good scene in the actual film. But the final moments in the film where, of course, Henry Allen gets off, because when Barry goes to undo what he did to create Flashpoint, he does another change, which doesn't involve saving his mother, but it involves saving his father. And one of the issues with the footage previously is that you couldn't see Henry Allen because he was facing down like that. He was wearing a hat, you couldn't see his face. It was like that. But now Barry moves the tomatoes that he needs to the top shelf. So he looks up, the camera sees his face, he gets off, he gets out of prison, all the good stuff. So now Barry in this timeline will have Henry out of prison, which is obviously better than nothing. That's better than nothing. But this is where we get something that there was a lot of speculation on what was going to happen. They've changed this. Now, the end scene, it's clearly Ezra on a green screen. You can just 100% tell. So obviously we knew that Ezra went and did some pickups like in April, or no, March, I think it might have been. And these were obviously it. So there's a scene with Barry, talking to Bruce Wayne, and we can hear that the voice is different. And who steps out? Originally it was Michael Keaton, and Supergirl was meant to be there as well, but there's no Supergirl at all this time. And Bruce Wayne, it's goddamn George Clooney. The cinema yesterday when I was watching it erupted. Now, maybe that was the intention, because I guess people assumed it was going to be Michael Keaton. I guess people just thought it was going to be Michael Keaton that popped out, but it was George goddamn Clooney. Yeah, it's not me exaggerating. It was the loudest cheer the cinema got. It was the loudest. I'm trying to think what else got, I think when Michael Keaton said, "I'm Batman," and then I think maybe Wonder Woman showing up. I think, and obviously there's laughing bits in regards to people going like, woo, and everything. When George Clooney appeared on screen, it was like, ow, my ears. Shut up, my ears. It hurt. People screaming. I was like, God, calm down. But I was like, okay, well, maybe you weren't expecting. People obviously are not going to expect it. I'm very interested to see what theater reactions are. They're going into it, and reactions from that, because I just don't think people thought it was going to happen. Especially if you're not on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you probably don't know this thing's going to even there was even rumors of it. So yeah, it was surprising to see George Clooney show up, and you get an F-bomb from Ezra, which I thought was funny as Barry. And then it ends. So that's the big question I'm having is, is there room to pick up from this? And if there is a sequel, does that mean George Clooney is going to be Bruce Wayne if this shows up again? I guess if it's just a Flash sequel and you just make it about Flash, there's no need to have George Clooney there as Batman unless you need that, or as Bruce Wayne, unless you specifically need it for a scene or something. But obviously that's going to be a very interesting way to see what happens there. But we do have an end credit scene which involves Barry at a bar with Jason Momoa's Aquaman. So Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa, is in this post-Flashpoint timeline. They're sort of talking about everything that's happened. So I wonder if this might be picked up in Aquaman 2, which isn't until the end of the year. And we have Blue Beetle in between, which apparently Blue Beetle is meant to be the first like character that's going to be used in James Gunn's DCU. So like new character introduced for James Gunn's DCU. He didn't say necessarily a character, but he said new character. So I'm very intrigued to see what happens there. And then, like the end scene is weird, just like Aquaman drunk and stuff like that and like collapsing. It's just like a comedic thing. It's not meant to be anything serious or setting anything up outside of the fact that I guess that Aquaman is in this post-Flashpoint timeline. But yeah, the movie, I enjoyed the hell out of it. I think it's fun. It's not perfect. It's got some errors, but the best thing about it is that it's fast. And that's not meant to be a Flash reference or anything like that. It is super fast paced. I think it's incredibly rewatchable. And I think that's one of the best things about it is that you could probably put it on at home and enjoy it and not be like bogged down in any story, just because it really does keep moving, which is the best thing about it. And there's no like dull character or anything like that, unless you do get annoyed by the younger Barry. But I enjoyed this movie really like much for like what it was. And like in regards to a sequel, I'd like to see it, just because of like more of this world, a more central city in this world. I wouldn't mind seeing more of what happens there and the Flash's day-to-day life within Central City. But yeah, maybe, fingers crossed. Maybe movie has to perform well to get a sequel, so we'll see if that happens. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome. You could drop a like and it shows support. Let me know in the comment section down below. What were your thoughts on the movie? Did you enjoy it? What were your favorite parts? Were there any major spoiler stuff that I didn't bother mentioning because I might have forgotten? There's a lot to talk about. Let me know in the comments. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.